May 7, 2018, 6:53 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. May 7, 2018, 6:51 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. What is it like to play the villain and play against one? Capitals analyst and former NHL enforcer Alan May talks Tom Wilson's suspension and the art of becoming the guy everyone loves to hate. Watch NHL with Fubo TV, Washington, D.C. Alan May was a tough customer during his NHL career with the Bruins, Oilers, Capitals, Stars, and Flames, amassing 1,348 penalty minutes in 393 career games, and now one of the sharper analysts in the game today, usually working between the benches at Capital One Arena for NBC Sports Washington. With Tom Wilson's recent suspension for his hit on Pittsburgh's Zach Aston Reese in Game 3 of their second-round Stanley Cup playoff series Tuesday night in Pittsburgh, Sporting News reached out to May for his perspective on Wilson. As a player, the three hits that have gotten attention during Washington's playoff run, as well as what it's like to skate into Pittsburgh wearing a target on your back in a Capitals sweater. Editor's note: portions of the interview have been edited for brevity and clarity. More controversial: Tom Wilson has built career on blurring lines. Sporting News: what do you think Wilson brings to the Capitals lineup? Alan May: one of the things that he brings, and I don't think he was necessarily brought into the National Hockey League properly, the role he was originally put in as young as he was basically used as an enforcer. And it wasn't fair to his first development as a player. As of this season, he's really turned his game around and become a more complete player, obviously not the offensive touch of a lot of players, but had a career year with 14 goals and has found a way to compete and be useful because he's worked on his speed. He's got straight line speed that people don't understand. He can get around. He scored some beautiful goals and plays from him this year where he roasted defensemen, skated right around them, got to the net, scored a goal, and made some great plays. He's got great speed, and he's starting to get a smarter touch inside the offensive zone and being a better accessory with top players where he's making the right offensive play to keep plays alive instead of killing the puck. I think the first few years he didn't really think the game through enough, and the coaching staff forced him not to let plays die, to make smarter plays, not just dump pucks in, but to make a pass here and there and how to protect the puck and move your legs. A lot of people see the penalty minutes, they see the fights, the hits on YouTube. They see the big hits, but I think he's really developed into a more balanced player that uses his size and strength and his speed to make offensive plays and to be on that side of it. More: Sean Avery says Brad Marchand's playoff act isn't worth a lick. SN: how has Wilson's game changed since he first entered the league? AM: I think as the league has evolved, and he started playing 7 minutes a night and it was basically like a hamster in a wheel, go out there and cycle the puck, change, back check, cycle the puck, change. There was no evolution, no growth in his game. He was getting confidence, getting games in, but I've seen too many players who started out like that, 12 years later, their game still haven't evolved. So with Barry Trotz and his coaching staff, they wanted more out of him, and there a time when everyone wanted power forwards like Milan Lucic, and they were comparing Wilson to Lucic, and Lucic got into the league at a different time, where there was some obstruction, teams were playing what they refer to as heavy hockey. Well, that's gone by the wayside, and now I think the Edmonton Oilers would want Milan Lucic to be more like Tom Wilson. He gets up and down the ice, he's one of the fastest players every game as far as forwards are concerned, and he's worked on that part of the game. So with the rule changes, Tom Wilson can skate as fast as he can in a straight line, and he's improving his agility. He can get up and down the ice and you can't cheat, you can't hook and hold him, and that's what makes him so dangerous. The staff has forced him, and they've given him opportunities, but he's had to earn them, to get on the top line, and as of this season, they called him a fixer in the DC. coaching staff. They put him on a line, and the line would get going. I think it gave him confidence. NHL Draft 2018, SN's Mock 2.0, Prospect Rankings. One of the biggest things to changing the way you play is how you think about your game. If you're just going out there and think, I have to hit every game and I've got to do this and I've got to drop the gloves, Wilson doesn't have to worry about dropping his gloves anymore because there's hardly anyone to do it within the league, and there were nights when you had 4, 5, maybe even 6, 7, 8 threats on a team, guys who were potentially ready and willing and wanting to drop the gloves. Now they have changed it so you don't have anyone that wants to do that. It's not a part of the game. If you don't evolve, because the game seems to change every 2 to 3 years the way it's played tactically, you're going to die. I think he's done a good job of adapting to the league, and now so much instead of being a penalty getter, he's a really good penalty killer as well, so that's part of him evolving. Barry Trotz, Lane Lambert, Blaine Forsythe and Todd Reardon have all developed him into a really good penalty killer. He's got the aptitude and hockey intelligence to be a very effective and excellent penalty killer in my opinion. SN, how did you view the 3 hits by Wilson that got scrutinized so far in the postseason? AM, the Alexander Wennberg hit. I was between the benches that game, and I think there were 2 hits. Josh Anderson on Michal Kempny, I didn't think was a suspendable offense, possibly a penalty. I thought Kempny put himself in a poor spot because he knew a player was barreling down on him. I look at the Wilson on Wennberg hit. It was an incident where there were 4 guys in the corner. Wilson had his feet planted on the ground low and Wennberg put himself in a bad position, and he put himself in a spot to get injured. He shouldn't be trusting players on the other team to look out for your best interest. We don't want guys crossing the line, but from where I was, it looked like Wennberg put himself in a bad position, got caught off balance and got hit pretty hard. But he also got hit by Ovechkin and his own defender, so I think league handled that right. On Brian Dumoulin, Game 2 I look at the Brian Dumoulin thing, there's not a whole lot you have to explain. When you're surprised you're going to get hit at the last second, your body lifts up, you go into defensive mode, and I think both Dumoulin and Wilson looked up and saw Ovi coming down on Dumoulin and he was throwing a big hit on him. Dumoulin goes to bail out, he turns right into Wilson, Wilson sees him, he kind of squints a bit, goes away from it and Dumoulin takes it. I've seen Pittsburgh Penguins hit guys like that. It's an unintended consequence of the way the game is played, and I didn't think anything would come of that. All the hockey guys I talked to didn't think it was suspendable. On Zach Aston Reese, Game 3, the Zach Aston Reese hit, in my opinion, that hit is completely different. Now, when every person arguing about the hit on either side of, now you have so many camera angles, and you've got into physics, and if you played, then you have to go into the way you read the rule book, there was gray area there, so it makes it really hard to argue that it's a great hit, and hard to argue it's an illegal hit. But, he got freight trained, and I heard it in the press, and on XM radio a guy said he had less than 2 seconds to prepare for that hit, but there is no advanced warning system in the National Hockey League where you have 5 or 6 or 12 seconds to worry about getting out of the way of a hit. Sometimes there's congested areas. Aston Reese skated into a congested area, Wilson looked like he was going for a change and still got him. And then, if you break it down and say he left his feet, well, Wilson ricocheted off of him and went flying into the bench. That he wasn't in the air, he didn't leave the skates on contact, he went into the air and to the contact. Had he gone the other way, I don't think Aston Reese would have been knocked out cold worse than had he used his other shoulder. The game is so fast and people in Washington won't like what I have to say, but I can see why it's a suspension, because it was a fast hit, and a big hit. The biggest problem with all these hits you're seeing, if it's not Tom Wilson that throws that hit, if it's the other way around, is it a suspension? Was that from a social media outcry and bad optics for the National Hockey League? Because we're seeing from a lot of different hits, why is that a suspension? I think that's where all the frustration comes from around the league, that we're seeing identical plays in games called different in-game and out-of-game. I think it's one of those tough plays. It's a 50-50 call, and I guess my point of it, there's so much gray area on it because there's camera angles, physics, before and after the hit, all these things go into it. The easiest thing to do is suspend a player on that, and hope it doesn't happen again. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but honestly I can see it being a suspension, but I can also see it not being a suspension, so I'm on the fence on this one. Golden Standard: how Vegas became the most successful expansion team in sports history. SN, when you were a player, you had to be aware of certain players on the ice. If you were playing against Wilson, would you have to be extra aware of where he was because of what he can do? You know what? He is what he is. He is who he is as a hockey player. He plays fast, he plays physical. I think he's toned his game down from where he was years ago. He keeps his skates on the ice now, he glides into the hit. A lot of times he was still moving and he was driving at the last minute. That's what he was taught, that's what he was doing his whole life, and that's why he got drafted, and pretty much any team in the league would have drafted him at that spot. You have to know, when I played, there were 3 guys during my era that you had to be aware of. I always said, I always knew where they sat on the bench. I wasn't scared of fighting them, but I was worried about them getting me with an open ice hit. It used to only be the defenseman that got you, but it was Scott Stevens, Brian Marchment and Darius Kasparaitis. They all hit in open ice, but all had a different technique. None of those guys ever got me. I always paid attention to where they were. Years ago, I think Jay Beagle was knocked out in a fight with Aaron Osham, and I always said it was on Jay, because you have to know who your opponent is, and have to be aware of who you're going against at all times, what they're capable of, what their role is, and that's part of the process. When you play against Tom Wilson, a guy who's coming and skating as fast as he is, who is going to finish his check, you've got to know where he is at all times. It doesn't mean he's dirty, it doesn't mean he's vicious, but that's how he plays the game. SN, you played on the Capitals in the early part of the Penguins' playoff rivalry. What is it like to have a target on your back in that building? How do you play the game like that? I'll say it's a dream come true. It shows you're relevant to the game. People are taking notice of who you are. I don't think Tom has been a malicious player throughout his career, and I've seen some players do awful, ridiculous things. Tom is a big guy. He's a monster. He's the biggest player. I think he's taller than Ovechkin. I don't know if he weighs more, but he gets up and down the ice. He doesn't have Ovi's shot, he doesn't have Ovi's passing ability, but he's Ovi's level of power and speed. And he's a guy who grew up playing a physical brand of hockey. If he was a goal scorer and had Ovi's shot, he'd be a completely different type of player, but he's relevant and people are going to notice. The Penguins have got players that the Caps hate. Patrick Hornqvist has a style of play that everyone knows who he is in every arena because he's a pain in the ass to play against. He's physical, he plays on the edge, he prefers to bump into goalies and make life miserable, and he also scores a lot of goals. SN, when you're between the benches, do you notice anything with Wilson? chirping or giving his teammates encouragement. He's the ultimate team player, and he probably at some point. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the captain of the Washington Capitals if and when Ovi retires. He's got leadership qualities, an incredible teammate who's respected. All of the older players, he's taking notes and taking lessons, and I think he definitely has a lot of outstanding qualities that make him a great teammate.